All right, so I'm here with Neely. Are you the head cook?
I am the relief manager.
The relief manager here at what number Waffle House is this?
2031 in
2031.
Boone, North Carolina.
All right, so how long you been cooking?
I've been cooking probably about 10 years, and at Waffle House for 3.5.
Would you consider what you do a low skill position?
No.
Okay, tell me about that.
I mean, I've heard it said that they judge the amount of stress in a job by the number of decisions per minute you make. So teachers, air traffic controllers, and cooks and servers are all pretty high up on the decisions per minute scale. So, and at Waffle House especially, we don't have actual tickets to reference. The orders are called. And
Hold on, will you say that again? Since I was rattling my keys over there.
yeah, so unlike most restaurants where there, is a ticket where there's a point of sale kiosk where the servers enter their orders and then it spits it out of the ticket machine to the kitchen, so the cooks have a ticket to reference. At Waffle House, there is only one handwritten ticket which the server, him or herself, will hold on to. They will call that order aloud to the cooks, and then the cooks from there will mark what's called marking themselves a reminder, which is something like a hieroglyphic on a plate. And then with the help of those marks on the plates, they're able to remember the orders that the servers had called and prepare them.
Okay, so first you have the call, and then you have the mark, and then what comes after the mark? Or actually, I guess it's the call and then the drop and then the mark, right? So tell me about the call and then tell me about the marking system.
Okay, right. So the servers are going to get the order from the customer, and they're going to order the food just the way you would normally, I want some eggs and some toast and some hash browns. The servers are then going to use a special ticket book that we have where they have a special shorthand for writing those orders down. From there, the server is going to approach the line where the cooks are waiting and give the order in 3 parts, what's called the pull, the drop, and the mark. Now, it's given in 3 parts that way because on a busy weekend there are 3 cooks. One cook working on the meats, another one on eggs and hash browns, and a third marking the plates. Like I said, these are reminders of what the orders are, so that the cooks can cook the correct order without the use of a ticket. So referencing the shorthand on their ticket, those servers are going to call. It's not exactly the way the customer would order the food. We have our own language and it's basically to make the call itself more efficient so that the server can get the information across in the least number of words possible to save time and confusion. So the server would call the order, we would mark it, and then we actually call it back to the server using the same language he or she did, just to confirm everything's correct. And from there, we cook the order, and then when it's ready, they'll come and get it.
And then, in my experience, sometimes, if you have a big table as the server, you go back and say, well, who got this item, and then you actually end up listing the item as it was listed on the menu and the way that the customer ordered it.
Right, right.
So
because
the code goes full circle.
Absolutely, because, I find myself making the mistake sometimes if I run food to the table as a cook. I'll say, hey, who had the order over light? Well, most people don't call eggs over light. They call it over easy. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, Waffle House has decided to dispense with the extra syllable and just call them overlights.
And furthermore, we have a particular way, or at least the store that I was working at, we had a particular way that we dealt with overlight orders, because I had to specifically ask, all right, so do you want the whites done in the yellow runny, right? Because if that's not exactly how they wanted it, then I had to call it differently. But normally, or not call it differently, but if that's how they wanted it, I had to call it as an over medium, right? As opposed to calling it as an overlight, in which case the whites might not be done the way that they want.
Yeah, and all those preferences and modifications, they have ways of marking those and ways of calling them. For instance, if I wanted to remind myself that toast is not getting butter, I would place a butter packet underneath the jelly packet to show that that's going to be a dry toast.
So, before we get further into some examples of marking, do you have any oral code that you just use between the cooks? Any particular language that's only going on there?
So, one of the things that's unique in the way we'll call orders is something you'll hear in Waffle House sometimes would be waffle on 4, out like 2.
Mm-hmm.
And so what would that mean? Well, that means you need to make 4 waffles, but it's only going to 2 people. So that would mean 2 double waffles, essentially.
Yep.
And so, and it's a helpful way of kind of putting everything together, because you might, for instance, call order scramble on 4, make 2 of them triple scramble. That's going to roll off the tongue a lot faster than saying, I need a triple scramble. I need another triple scramble. Right. I need another scramble. I need another scramble. We're just trying to consolidate and package everything in as nice a word package as we can.
It's interesting how the grammar and the syntax change there. Because you break out of standard written English there when you say this thing occurring on 4. I mean, because what is the on doing there? What is that preposition doing?
Yeah, I guess on would refer to a customer, really, in a certain sense.
So we're putting
if
the
I say
eggs on.
order scramble on 4, that's 4 different orders scramble for 4 different people, so 4 different plates.
So what are some other complicated order situations that you get? Like, I remember I never quite understood what the proper way to order a piggyback, or to do a piggyback order, or to call a piggyback order was.
Oh, yeah. And this is one that I've just kind of adopted from other kitchens I've worked at. But, let's say somebody ordered a cheesesteak hash brown bowl, but they wanted to add overlights. And this is just kitchen lingo. I would call it mark a cheesesteak bowl wearing overlights. Because in a sense the bowl is wearing overlight eggs on it. But that's one you'll hear not just in Waffle House, but in lots of kitchens.
So let's get into the meat of this, man. Tell me about the marking.
Well, I think much in the way that some Egyptologists argue that hieroglyphics are a more efficient communication system because the pictograms can communicate multiple meanings all at once in the way that a letter or word can't necessarily do. So what do I mean by that? Well, with egg orders at Waffle House, typically you're denoting an order for eggs with a jelly packet. Now, the number of jelly packets is going to tell you how many eggs. The location of that jelly packet on the plate is going to tell you how they're cooked. And whether or not the jelly pack is sitting on top of a butter is going to tell you whether the toast that goes with those eggs is dry or not. So you're looking at one simple object on a plate, but it's actually communicating several different things at once. So in a way, it's almost more efficient than, your standard alphabetical language. And an added bonus is you can see them from a lot farther away. Typically at a restaurant with tickets, they're very small. You got to walk right up to it and squint at the ticket. But I can see a mark on a plate from 3 yards away. So,
so how deep does this marking system go? Give me some other examples, and how many different objects there on the line could possibly come into play?
Right. So we're using jelly packets, butter packets, ketchup packets, mayonnaise packets. The mayonnaise is an interesting one, so I'll talk about that for a minute. So, a mayonnaise symbolizes a quarter. That's a burger, if it's on the bottom of the plate. But if you have pickles on a plate, denoting another type of meat for the sandwich, then all of a sudden, this mayonnaise packet now means eggs for a sandwich. And it would be put in the 3 o'clock position on the plate so that we know that is an overwell egg going on the sandwich. This same mayonnaise packet, when placed on the hash brown section, a mayonnaise packet has a light side and a dark side. So if you had the light side showing, that would mean those hash browns are scattered light. If you had the dark side showing, that would mean the hash browns are scattered well. Same thing goes with the eggs. Some people prefer their eggs scrambled light, so that would be the light side of the mayonnaise packet. Turn it over, scrambled well, so that's eggs that are, cooked until they're not wet anymore.
Yeah,
essentially. But so you can see just this one little mayonnaise packet is doing a whole lot of work for you.
Yeah, it's really versatile. When you first were comparing the items as symbols, right, to letters and words, I was thinking in my head, I think that's more true of letters than it is of words, because words can have like several different meanings. But with just seeing the versatility of the mayonnaise packet, I see where you're going with that. You can potentially do a lot more with just that one image, and at least in some cases, or a lot of cases.
Right, and the plate is kind of like your palette, because like I say, the location on the plate, whether it's 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 9 o'clock, is telling you, different things. Yeah.
Mind if I refill my coffee real quick?
I got you.
Oh, thanks. I guess when you're not oh, there it is. Honestly, when you're just a customer, there really aren't a lot of accessible trash cans. So, what would you say, what can you say about the learning curve in terms of being a cook? Because correct me if I'm wrong, but being a cook, you have to know all of the different languages. You have to know the language of the menu, right? You have to know or if not the language of the menu, you at least have to know the language that the servers are using when they're calling the orders.
Right.
Right? And then you have to know the marking system.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, it's one of the things that's kind of interesting about Waffle House is you will have cooks who maybe necessarily don't understand the shorthand that the servers are writing on the tickets because they never hold or read a ticket for the most part. They hear them called aloud. At the same time, you have servers that cannot understand the marks that are on the plates because they don't really need to. They don't come back for those plates until the food has been prepared and is sitting on them. So at that point, they know exactly what they're grabbing, and so there's a lot of servers that don't understand the marks. Now, a manager on a very busy day will fulfill the role of expediter. So this is somebody who's kind of bringing all the languages together. So if the servers are swamped and don't have time to call their own tickets, they'll hand them off to the manager, who will then expedite or read the tickets and call them aloud to the cooks. So that manager would have to be familiar with the shorthand on the tickets, the marks on the plates, as well as the proper way to call the ticket itself so that the cooks can hear and understand and mark correctly.
What do you think about like the difficulty of learning each one of those languages?
That was the other part of your question.
In terms of learning it thoroughly, becoming fluent.
Yeah.
I waited tables for 3 months, and there were still a lot of things that I didn't really get. I certainly never got all of the shorthand down. I developed my own version of it.
It's one of the ironies about working at Waffle House, because I think for whatever reason there's a perception that sort of the bottom of the barrel workers are the ones that work at Waffle House. But the fact of the matter is, people who don't have a head on their shoulders do come here and work, but they're not going to last. Having worked here for almost 4 years, I've noticed that the people that really succeed at Waffle House are clever. It's not. It's fast paced and it's mentally taxing, and if you don't stay organized, you'll get swamped really fast.
Yeah. So would you? All right. Do you know all of those languages fluently?
Yes, yeah. I have worked as a server and as a cook, and so I've seen both sides of it, and the best cooks can also serve, the best servers can also cook. It's just the two are two pieces of the same puzzle, and they're. In other restaurants, you can get away with a breakdown in communication between front of house and back of house. That will not fly at Waffle House. You're going to have to be able to communicate with your servers, and if they are not able to call correctly, you're going to have to get them to a point that they can. Otherwise, it's just you're never going to get the right orders out.
And it's I think there's something to be said for when you're doing that, and the fact that sometimes you have to do that in front of people who are fluent in Waffle House lingo. People who have worked at Waffle Houses, but even the people who haven't, they are able to see, they're able to see the cook line, they're able to see everything the server's doing at all times. It's an intimate space.
Sure, sure. And you have a lot of customers that want to join in the game. They will call their orders using, the hash brown lingo, smothered for onions, capped for mushrooms, et cetera, et cetera. People like to be a part of things, and yeah, you're absolutely right. Dinner and a show, as they call it.
So, thinking in terms of multimodal theory, my first instinct would be to say that this is like similar language that's occurring in different modes. But, that is true and it isn't true. Would you say that, do you think that you'd be confident in saying that these, well, we've said lingos already, these codes that people in different positions at Waffle House have to use rise to the level in terms of their complexity of being languages?
Oh man.
Or would you just say Waffle House has a language of its own?
I mean, I would say it, there's logic to it, and it, it tries to be. I mean, it's not complex for complexity's sake. So people would ask, well, then why do you say capped for mushrooms instead of just mushrooms? Well, there's a perfect explanation for that. When we say capped, we're referring to mushrooms in the hash browns. If you say mushroom, you're referring to mushrooms in a sandwich or in eggs. So anytime we hear these special words for the ingredients like diced, smothered, capped, chunked, etc., we know immediately that the server is referring to the hash browns and ingredients going into the hash browns. So everything is designed to avoid ambiguity and confusion and promote efficiency.
Do you think it's effective? Do you think that it ultimately meets its goal?
Absolutely. I think there's been research done that says for corporate sit-down restaurants, Waffle House has some of the lowest ticket times of any. A server can get an order from a customer and without even turning on their heel to walk away from the table can scream the order across the restaurant, and will be within the next 30 seconds it's going to start being cooked.
Yeah.
Now, at no other restaurant is that going to happen. The server's going to have to wander around, wait in line for the kiosk, for the point of sale system, slowly peck in their order on the touch screen, and then it's going to feed out of the tickets, and then they're going to put the ticket up onto the window and, eventually look at it, read it, and start cooking it. But at Waffle House, you're almost forced to deal with each ticket in order to get it out of the way, and the calling system helps control the pace.
Yeah, and from what I understand, once you have enough plates there on the line on your what do you call that board over there that you're working on? But the board in front of the burners, once that's filled up, you just have to wait. You just have to work all those out.
Right.
And you can only put one more down at a time.
Well, and it is interesting, and I should note that Waffle House did not always have a mark system. They always had a calling system. So in the past, there were cooks that would literally cook just by memory. And I've heard it said that during that time, you had to hire a caliber of cook because only really, really sharp folks could do it. But eventually I think they instituted the mark system because people were sort of starting to do that already. They were setting up the plate like a target for the food to land on. Certain size plates, a smaller plate, you knew that'd be a side order. A larger plate, you knew that'd be the... Yes, sir. Have a good one, Ivan. Thank you.
Are you telling me this evolved?
Oh, yeah.
At several different restaurants at once, and they finally just made it a system, or I want to know about this.
I think the marking system was born out of something that happens in lots of restaurants. It's when cooks start to cook an order, one of the very first things they'll often do is throw down their pallet or their landing pad or the target. That is the plate that it's going on. So if you've got a fish plate, that's the right size for fish, you know that probably fish is going to land on it. So the plate itself is already reminding you about something you need to cook. So it's not a bridge too far to go from there and throw a few jelly packets and ketchup packets and syrup packets on there to help you remind you of some other things as well.
I'll go ahead and take that. I think we're probably going to be finished up here soon.
Oh, it's
Gosh, what was I going to ask you next? Oh, so what can you, oh, I remember. I got it. So two more questions, I guess. One is, do you feel like your memory is improved from being a cook?
Oh man, I mean, my Waffle House memory, absolutely. I mean, just having a context for it, I'm light years faster than when I first started. Now, whether it's improving my short-term memory overall, I think I would actually say yes, because nowadays, when people speak to me, I find myself sort of calling back what they've just said to me in my head. I can't help it. It's force of habit.
Like word for word, or like
Almost word for word.
or like your interpretation of what they've said.
As close as I can, word for word.
Oh, you mean echoing like their words,
Echoing
like you're
their
saying it back, but inside your. Okay, never
inside
mind.
my
I
head,
misunderstood
yeah,
what you
yeah.
were saying. I was thinking about a class or a group I meet with at school where we're supposed to listen to each other and then tell each other what we think
Yeah.
the other person just said.
There's actually a fascinating book. It's called Orality versus Literacy. I think it's by Walter Ong. And he talks a lot in this book.
I know that. I know
Yeah.
that book. Keep talking.
Yeah,
This is my area.
Yeah. He talks a lot in that book about how literacy as a technology didn't come with certain drawbacks. It wasn't all benefit. It has in some ways hurt people's memories, the technology of writing. And he goes into depth about that, but
Do me a favor. Say the name of the book again, in case I was talking over you.
Yeah, Orality and Literacy by Walter Ong. He talks about written works that come from what you'd call like a primary oral culture. So if you're talking about the Iliad or the Odyssey, and they say the wine dark sea, that's almost formulaic. It's almost like a call, waffle on 3, the wine dark sea. It's a way of nesting the words into a nice little package so that the mind has something to grab onto.
It's kind of like you're going down a hallway, right? And you're opening up each one of these doors. So like that's some of the like I don't know who said this, but there are multiple theories about how people in oral culture were able to remember those entire epics, at once,
Right.
to be able to recite them.
Yeah.
And so they had to have ways to package that information. And so some of those phrases that they're using, right,
Right.
Are probably more consistently repetitive than others. So you can have stuff that is sort of just rehashed with different language, and then you can have parts where it's just, it could be all directly recited, but if it's not, you could have parts that are rehashed with different language, and then parts that are always the same.
Right.
So that you're reminding yourself, oh yeah, I need to this part now, this part. It's like the introduction to a chapter.
One of the most interesting things in the book, he's talking about storytellers who come from primarily oral cultures. They will, if they tell a story and they tell it again at a later date, it might be slightly different, but and the order might be slightly changed, but it's essentially the same exact story because they're using formulas to remember what leads to next. But these people, if you ask them if they're giving it verbatim, word for word, they insist that they are. They insist that they are because
that's funny.
They have no way of knowing otherwise.
Right.
They do not have this technology to prove it.
But maybe even the concept of verbatim was different. Do you know what in a way that we can't even understand?
Right. Well, I mean, what is verbatim?
I mean, in terms of how do you claim to have done something verbatim when you know But do you even know that you can't remember whether you did it right or not?
Right.
You know what I mean? And if you do, does verbatim mean something slightly different in that context? Like that's one of the really cool things about studies of oral culture and orality alone, and orality, pre-literacy, is that the way that you think, we cannot get back to that. We can dance around it. We can make critical statements about it all day. We can never understand how like the Greeks thought before they started writing. We just won't ever get it. That's cool that you brought that book up.
It's an important book.
It really is. Yeah. So the other thing that I want to ask you is, I'd like to hear about the experience of, when you're on the floor, you're cooking, the store is busy and you're hearing all of the languages or all of the modes. I guess you're hearing customers chat with each other, right? But then you're also hearing customers order, right?
Yeah.
You're hearing
It's
you're
one of my
hearing
pet
calls
peeves.
come in, and then you're also seeing the marks, right? And then
Right.
you're also having a discussion with the cooks, and all of those languages, right? Or sorry, you are familiar with all those modes. You can interpret all that. So what's that like?
Oh yeah, I mean it's it takes a certain amount of discipline and control to hold it all together. I mean, we'll often insist that only one server talk to us at a time, and you mentioned, customers ordering. One of my pet peeves is when somebody's calling an order and, right behind me, I can hear somebody loudly giving his order to another server, because it can kind of get all jumbled in your head, and I think that's when the marks really come into handy, because you have that visual aid to kind of combat all the word jumble that's going on around you.
So you're getting the message, but it's not confusing the verbal stuff that's going on. That's awesome. That makes sense. I hadn't even thought about that. Well, do you have trouble filtering out one verbal line, like so that you can focus on another? I'm sure you have to sort of do some switching around like that, training your oral attention.
Yeah, sure, and I mean, and that's one of the reasons the callback is such an important part. To call back to the server exactly what you have heard as the cook. So you've already translated it at that point into marks on the plate. So you're looking at the marks on your plate, reading them in a sense, even though they're not actual words, and turning that into a call. The server, meanwhile, is reading the shorthand on their ticket to make sure that the call jives with what they have on their ticket. And so there are fewer mistakes, there's less food waste. It's a great system. I mean, it works for me.
Awesome. Is there anything else you want to add?
I mean, like I said, it's not for everybody, but it's an interesting system, and it's a fun place to work. It's challenging.
Awesome. Thank you, Neely.
Thank you so much, David.
Yeah.